All right, we'll call to order. We have a joint meeting, special meeting between Safety and Public Works and the Public Utilities Commission regarding improvement 24-05 alley between South 6th and South 7th Streets from Paul Street to St. Joseph Street. Just to kind of start it off, this is a project that has already been put out for bid. It looks like both by at least for bids by the commission on the 30th of January for the water part. And it's been put up for bid as of our last meeting by the council. So if we're going to delay anything, I think that would be full council action, but we can bring a recommendation to the meeting later on tonight. But we can get as much information tonight as we can possibly get. Did everybody get a chance to go through the memo? Did you guys?
I have not, but that's okay.
Okay. If everybody hasn't, Jesse, what we'll probably do is have Jesse start, hit the high points on that. And then whoever you guys want to represent you, either a chair or a staff member, fill in opinions or recommendations on where you guys are at today. Okay? So Jesse, if you want to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just quick clarify. So at the last meeting, we authorized the bidding. We haven't been able to get out to bid yet. We're still working on finalizing the plan. So that's still in the process, but we're working diligently towards it. So just to get everybody caught up to speed a little bit on the process. So this alley specifically was brought up through a petition that we reached out to some of the residents with an adjacent construction project and asked if they wanted to see an improvement done to their surface in the alley. We did receive a petition from just under half of the frontage. With that, we discussed with BPU if there was a desire to replace that water main underneath the alley. We knew it was older, it wasn't newer main, and there was a desire to do that. So we reached out to our city attorney, knowing that there's pretty strict rules and regulations that you can put together with the 429 process on what can be included in the scope of work, because the petition specifically said resurfacing. It didn't say anything else other than the resurfacing. So based on the recommendation from the attorney, he recommended that we move this to a council-initiated project rather than a petition-initiated project. Most of the process is the same with a couple tweaks, but this allows us to include water main as part of the scope of the project. So since then, we've moved this process forward with a feasibility study under the understanding that we were aiming to replace the water main and the services at least off of the water main out to about as close to the right-of-way as we could feasibly do. And then we called for a public hearing at the February 20th meeting. We had a few questions from council as well as one person that came up in support of the project. He had questions about timing, but was supportive of the resurfacing. The one question that Alderman Chezok had regarding the timing of the project was, is this something that could get delayed a year? Is that something that we could do? We did report that, we can absolutely delay a project a year. It's up to the council when they want to execute a project. We just lose the opportunity to potentially have some of those cost savings by having an adjacent contractor that's doing similar work. So with that, so far we've continued to move the project forward with the designs under the understanding that our plan was not only to resurface the project, but also to replace water main as well as the water services out to the edge of the right-of-way of the alley with new curb stops, with the exception of 3 specific locations that we identified are going to be future trouble issues for us because the existing services are underneath a structure or nearby a structure. We don't want to be digging near those areas. So those 3, we're actually going to install a second service in a location that's a little bit more advantageous for us in the future should we want to connect. We give them that place that they can do that without impacting their structure. So we've continued to have discussions about that, and I know our engineering staff has been talking with BPU staff about the details of where those locations are going to be and what we want to do. Some of the things that are laid out in the memo are some of the requirements of the 429 process, some of the limits of that, as well as our special assessment policy and what's allowed with that. And then just some of the considerations. I know we've talked about the private service lines, the private water service lines beyond the curb stop out to the home. And we've had a shared desire to replace those service lines whenever possible. I know we do have some concerns about what that process looks like, what our policies are in place, getting those policies in place that would allow us to replace those services or what that looks like in the future. But working beyond the right of way, those are things that we want to make sure that we have in place before we do those works. The other concern that we do have with delaying the project, and I kind of illustrated this more in the memo, is we have a pretty heavy slate of projects next year between Beach and Oak Ridge, Wright and 10th. Those are likely both going to end up being reconstruction projects, as well as some significant amount of resurfacing projects that we've been talking about, that all of these projects would like to see some water main replaced. What we need to do is figure out how that can possibly fit into the scope of these works and what that looks like in massaging all those pieces, because what's allowed in our special assessment policy, with the resurfacing, it'll be a little bit more difficult. So we got to get all that massaged and figured out. But we have a pretty hefty workload next year. So adding this to next year is going to make it a little bit more difficult for us to do. We can hire it out, but obviously hiring it out to an engineering consulting service is quite a bit more expense than doing it internally. The goal of having it done this year is, because we're working on a reconstruction a block away, we're hopeful that our staff can help administer this part of the project at the same time. So with that, again, we're open to whatever the council and the commission really want to do. If they want to push it a year, we're okay with that. We just lose some of the different advantages that we have of constructing it this year. But we're hopeful that we're setting the design up in a way that whenever we want to come back and do these private service lines, whether that's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, that we've done it in a manner that allows us to do so without disturbing the alley all too much.
Thank you. So before we move on to the other side, two questions that are my two main concerns. Can it be done this year? And your answer, it sounds like, is yes.
Yes, our staff should be within the next couple weeks finishing up the design, and we can go out to bid
Okay.
pretty quickly after that.
And number two would be, is it more expensive this year? If it can be done, is it more expensive this year or more expensive next year? And it sounds like it's more expensive next year in your opinion.
Without seeing bids, my assumption is that because we have adjacent contractors,
Before we move to the
Yeah,
next.
Jesse, when we talk about projects going out this year for this year, at this point in the game, isn't it true that a lot of contractors already have their schedule set for what they hope to do for this upcoming year?
depends on the part of the year. We're still right in that area where bidding projects is pretty advantageous. It's when you get into April and May you're a little bit more tricky. It also depends on the market, how many construction projects are going on. Some years are lighter than others and some are heavier than others. Obviously, the heavier years are going to be a little bit more competitive in trying to find a
And then,
contractor.
and this particular project, it's rather a two-block section of alley. It's mostly going to be materials, and then, of course, if you save on mobility, so what I'm asking is, it's not going to be something, like you said, it'd be more advantageous for people already that have contracts in the South Brainerd project to do this work by being in proximity. So you think they would be aggressive in that additional cost?
I believe they would be.
Okay, would it not be fair then, based on the other projects we have in 2025, like the roundabout, some of the others down there in Graydon, I believe, in that area? Isn't that a close proximity as well to this?
Correct. Although the Graydon, well, I guess it depends on if we scope the water main with it. But yes, they are not too far away next year either.
Wouldn't the same theory apply then as far as aggressiveness and trying to get this two-block section of alley?
Very possible, yep.
Okay, I'm asking that because I wish everybody, you got to consider everything here, so.
That's a good point, Jeff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, that's what I got so far.
Anybody from the BPU Commission have any questions for Mr. Dean? You got your microphone on?
Do I need it on?
Yeah, be great. We're
Jesse,
recording.
how long of a project is this supposed to be? The one that's in the surrounding area?
I would guess that it's probably going to take the majority of the summer. It is split into two phases, kind of the north half, which is the area of 7th, Tamarack, Sycamore, Rosewood, those handful of blocks. And then the other phase is the south half, which is Todd, the other section of 7th and 8th, kind of that southern area. So it's most likely going to take most of the summer. It'd be an easy comparison to North Brainerd last year. Even with the drought and us being able to really go through that project without any delay for rain, it took us all the way through Labor Day, and they started it as soon as the weather allowed them to. I'm not going to predict that we're going to have another drought year like we did, but I would anticipate that it would take all of the summer.
Okay, with that being said, I mean, if the residents are willing to do that, but my question would be, is whoever's going to remove the tar is going to remove the tar, I assume, all of it at the same time, including the alley. So their alley is going to be ripped up. All the streets are going to be ripped up. How far away are they going to have to park?
So
Because everyone on the west side of that alley, the only place they have is the alley.
yes, sir. So the section of South 7th that's on the east side of this alley is not being reconstructed this year. So most of those people on the east side of the alley would have South 7th as an accessible access for them. Same thing for the people on the west. They'd be able to use 7th if they needed to. My guess is, irregardless, they were going to have some trouble, although a lot of them do have a private driveway. Much like a lot of our construction projects, usually we try and have them closed up and I'll say passable by the end of the working day. It's just when they're trenching in the water main is when it's inaccessible.
And that's either way. So, thank you.
Thank you. Do you guys have somebody you want to represent you, or one of you that wants to give the?
I don't necessarily know that I want to represent us all, because I think we all had some questions about it. And Jesse, we talked a little bit, and I would actually really want to come from staff, is if we're prepared for it. Because we talk about the summer as being the length of time, but are we prepared to do the water main switch out? Do we have the materials? Do we have the contractors? Are we doing it? I don't know any of those things, because that's the conversations you guys are having. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same time frame, because at our last commission meeting, we discussed the assumption, we just made the assumption that potentially the sewer was being replaced at this time. It was just now told to me that the sewer is fairly deep and that it isn't planned to be replaced. We were concerned that we were paying SEH for design cost. So I think we just didn't have a lot of answers at the time of our meeting, so we kind of put it back out there to say we have a lot more questions now than we did prior to this getting started. So I think with that being said, I don't know if I've answered or addressed the things that we talked about at our meeting. So if I am missing something, please step forward or say something. But it would really be BPU staff that I would have questions to make sure that we have really organized this as a complete project that we could actually do now, or is this something that we do need to, push maybe into the following year? So that being said, if you
I can attempt to speak to this. So there's a couple parts of the project right now that I'm still a little confused by. The 429 rules. How does that apply to BPU water main in a project that wasn't in? So we added that into that project, correct?
Yes, so by switching this, we can still do the 429 process, but what we're limited to is what's in our special assessment policy. So the assessment policy does state that half of the cost would be for the resurfacing only, would be borne by the city. The other half would be assessed to the property owners. All water main costs, water main services, and the services associated with that are costs that BPU covers. Very similar to most of our street reconstruction projects.
I would agree, and I'm just trying to highlight so everybody understands kind of that there's lots of moving parts to these projects, and Jesse did a very good job with the memo here. I think it outlines where we're at very well, so I appreciate the work you put into that. A couple things that I'll add in there, though, is like where we talk about where the burden is borne. You just said it correctly, BPU's coffers will pay for that. So that's ratepayers' money that spends that. In your memo, you put city, which I understand. We are all part of the city, we're a department of the city, but it gets confusing when we try to figure out what buckets is this money actually coming out of. So this isn't an approved BPU project per se. It's something the BPU could get done this year if need be. I think the question that I kind of have is, who has the responsibility of the water main? We go back to the charter language and understand the operations and maintenance of our water services or our water mains. So I'm a little confused on the direction right there on how we're approaching this project and how we should be looking at these projects going forward. The engineering department does a great job engineering these projects for us, but the reality of it is this project could have been separate. We could have done our water main, the city could have came in with their partnership with adjacent property owners and done the tar, and BPU could have just taken care of this. I think that's part of my confusion of where we're at right now. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse, or if I'm misspeaking on some of this. So I think that's where some of the confusion's coming from, the communication piece for at a staff level is where do we need to engage as BPU as far as developing these projects? We do have staff that are working with the engineering department, laying out where these services will go. But at the end of the day, we do know that all these services on the BPU side and the residential side will have to be changed out in 10 years. So the BPU's prerogative, I think, in this project is how do we scope these projects out to give our residents the best bang for their buck, if you will, as these projects come in. They may have contractors that can come in and do the work on the private side for them, but as a utility, we would like to go in there and have those conversations. Not that we want to manage the project per se for them, but give them the opportunity to be able to do their work at the same time while we're in there doing the work. This is common practice for BPU. We do this on a regular basis. So we work with the private side all the time. That's not part of any extra right-of-way acquisitions. We don't have to get special assessments. This is a day-to-day operation for BPU. So I get a little, and I'm not very well read, I'll be honest, on the statute 429. I had to look that up. I wasn't sure what that was. I read into it. But nothing that we deal with on a day-to-day, so it's a little outside of our scope. So the communication piece of how these projects get laid out and when they get lumped into another project is definitely a spot where we can work together to understand those processes better. But as of right now, it seems like a one-off to me for this is just typical BPU day-to-day operations.
Trent, could you maybe just, during the commission meeting, we just talked a bit more about maybe just giving this a little bit more of a comprehensive look and just what a little bit of additional due diligence would benefit our customers. So could you just go into that a little bit more too?
Yes, absolutely. I think so. The ability for us to get out in front of our customers and explain to them the service line inventory that we're doing, and that's going to be across the entire public water system, but be able to engage those and explain to them that in the next 10 years, you will have to replace your line if it's found to be in either a lead or a galvanized line. Through this construction of this era, we know there's quite a bit. This was a common material used through those timeframes. So we're not going to be surprised to find a lot of galvanized services. So to do these projects right now, it's one trench, it's one hole. If we can have that contractor that's doing the work for us potentially do a contract with them on the private side, it's just a win-win all the way around. There's cost savings there.
So along with that, though, it's the education of the mandate, correct, that we are all under. So
Yes, thank you.
that would be something that needs to be explained to the customers. And then again, so there is cost savings, and I can certainly respect what the city engineer, Jesse, is saying about getting this done this summer and try to take advantage of that. But again, at the commission meeting, we were just taking a look at it from a comprehensive standpoint and the advantage of maybe thinking about this and looking at the mandates and the timing of water service lines. The other thing I believe is that some of the existing service lines are beneath structures, so they'd have to be relocated. And I think, Jesse, you had made mention of that in your report. But so I just wanted the council members to know that was part of our conversation too, was just the advantage of potentially taking a bit more time to really think this through and communicate to the customers what's coming down the line. Also, what this would potentially do is set a precedent for future projects where we're replacing private lines, private services, and how that can be communicated and coordinated with the city of Brainerd and Jesse and his team. So, yeah, it's just nice, I think, just to give a little bit of background on that. And again, that was a lot of what we had talked about at the commission meeting.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Chesak.
So when we talk about the water line and any other street alley construction or, resurfacing, I'm a little confused because if the water is the sole propriety or responsibility of public utilities, and we order in this project as we did on the 20th, although we don't have to accept any bids, and you said plans haven't been put together yet, but if we move forward on this and the commission says, we're not doing the water, do we just hire somebody else to do the water, and can we even do that? Anybody know the answer to that question? Based on the charter, I don't think we can. I'm just asking.
So we design the water as part of our reconstruction projects because we're doing it internally, there's going to be a lot of cost savings. We can hire those designs out to a consulting engineering firm. They just come at a much more higher premium.
I'm talking about the actual putting the water line in. That's public utilities that does that exclusively, correct?
We typically hire that out as part of our construction
But
project.
the expense comes from public utilities of that water line.
Yes, they fund whatever that portion of the construction project is
And
allocated
if
to the
they
water
said,
main.
no, we're not going to do that, where the commission says, sorry, we're not going to participate, what do we do then?
So in this instance, I would look for council direction if they wanted to move forward with the resurfacing at this time, or if they would want to wait until that water main wanted to be replaced.
I think, if I may, I think he's trying to clarify for, not just for this project, but for future projects as well. If BPU says we're not on board with, changing out water mains, do they have the power to say, you go ahead and resurface, we're not touching any water mains? Or is it this, can the city override and say, no, we're going ahead and doing that because we're hiring somebody to do it, say, whatever excavating service is doing that? How does that work? How does that relationship work? Because I think if we all knew that in here, it would work better for our communication too. We should.
So I guess I would refer back to the joint workshop from January on the discussions of the charter. I guess I would not be the person to interpret what that charter means, but my understanding is that the operations and the decision to replace water main as part of a construction project would come from the Public Utilities Commission. And I believe Alderman Johnson kind of implied that as the part of this process is requested that staff bring this project to the Utilities Commission. I think it was in their February meeting, or maybe it was January meeting, to get basically an approval. Let's go ahead and move forward with replacing the water main as an unbudgeted expense because we did not expect this project to come up until the petition came up. So I think that was Alderman Johnson's kind of implication that he wanted to buy off from the Utilities Commission to go ahead forward.
Right.
So on the 31st, the Public Utilities met on January, they ordered estimates for the water. They didn't meet again until February 27th, where a week before, we approved going out for plans and specs and ordering in bids. So I think, would it maybe been better to wait till tonight to see what the Public Utilities thought last Tuesday? It seemed, that's kind of where I think some confusion's coming as well.
Sure. And I think this is what it comes down to is better communication, both sides. I think we can all improve on that, and we're working on it. We did mention at a meeting not long ago that maybe we would have more representation from BPUs, either the committee or staff, at our council meetings. So this is a good time of year for us to have somebody there for those questions to be answered. But I think where we're at right now is it's an awkward, kind of an awkward project because for whatever reason, it wasn't in the capital improvement plan. It should have been because I started hearing about those two alleys the first year I was here, 3 years ago, because they're in such rough shape and they're not getting any better. We keep patching them, but it doesn't stick. So we got a petition this year to add it, which is just the asphalt. But Mr. Chazak makes a good point here that why would we do that and then just do it again in a few years? Then you're going to get assessed twice. We're going to replace the water main within 10 years. Because those alleys were, and we have Mr. Smokey here, those alleys were done, you lived there at that time, correct? One time aggregate overlay in 30 years. So they're old and they're due. So we really want to get that done. I wish it would have been part of the capital improvement plan that was set up years ago with this project, but somehow that was missed. And I think maybe there was opinions on whether we even do alleys or not back then, and that's part of it. But we do have to take care of the water main at some point. So we just have to decide, like I said earlier, can we do it? And does it save us money this year or next year? Those are the two main things. Should we do it, or is it a lot of extra work? Isn't really what I'm looking for. It's,
Mr. Chair?
can we, and what's the cost difference?
Yeah, that's the point I was going to ask. We're talking about saving money, but nobody has a specific figure on that. It's all guesswork. Specifically, even if the contractor, he might be aggressive, there's no guarantee they'll even bid on it. So, I mean, you would think they would. I get that, but we're speculating on how much we're gonna save. If there's a value in that, I mean, I guess I would like to save as much as we can for the property owners. They're gonna pay for that asphalt. Again, I don't want to put asphalt down and have to come back. And what's the downside? I think if the decision here is we're gonna do it this year or next year. So what is the major downside of waiting a year on this alley project? And based on that, if we did wait, could we throw a little extra on that alley like we've been doing to make it a more passable alley for this year and into next year before it got done if we waited?
It's a good question, yeah.
I just-
Can we grind it down? Can we do a more temporary surface until the water gets replaced next year? I don't know if that saves money either, but
Yeah, I don't know if the residents are willing to just put class 5 down for a year, but my question is when we have to put in these new lines, and we're hoping to do that at a lot of them at the same time, if we can't do it this year, it's gonna be hard to inventory that and get them done, all done in time for when this project starts. I think if we have that extra year to go and talk to all of the residents, see who wants to do it at the time of the project, and I mean, if they're gonna wait 5 years, then it doesn't really matter. But I'm concerned about the ones that, you know, they're gonna say, as soon as this thing gets tarred, they're gonna say, well, why didn't you tell me? You know, I would have had that service connected then, because I don't know where the curb stop is. There's no curb. So how far out is that from what's gonna be tarred? And if someone comes in, you know, a month after we get done with this project and they want that replaced, how much of the tar is going to be torn up? I mean, they're going to have to dig a hole. And what's it down, 10 feet?
About 8.
8? So you got an 8-foot hole. So are you going to be then digging up half of the alley to get to their connection? You know, it just seems to me 1 year to get that inventory done and get this, and make sure we do it right, because I know what's going to happen. You're going to have problems if we rush the project. It's typically what happens.
I'd like to repeat what Mayor Bordeaux has said a number of times. Anytime we have something controversial, the catalyst behind it is always something we seem to be rushing. And this seems to be a perfect example of that. I mean, again, the people petition because they want an alley resurfaced. That seems pretty straightforward and it's simple. But yet, when you look underneath, we have a water line that we'd be crazy not to replace it if we're tearing up everything and gonna put new asphalt down. Now, are we gonna save a lot of money, a little money, no money by having perhaps the contractor working on the South Sixth Street project bid on this too? I would imagine we would, but we don't know how much. We don't know what cost or unit prices or materials are. And I don't like rushing stuff, and so that's kind of why I encouraged the commission to have this joint meeting last Tuesday. So I think this is good though, because we don't get this at a council meeting. We don't get discussion like this, and I mean, I'm glad it doesn't happen often, because this is kind of one of those things it's a necessary thing, I think, at this point, and I'm glad we're hearing what we're hearing, so.
And I just want to clear one other thing up. The conversation that took place here just a little bit ago about whether BPU is going to participate or not in a project when it comes to water lines, if Jesse or whoever determines that, you know, the infrastructure underneath the street needs to be done, we're going to participate. That's never going to be an issue. So
I just have a couple of clarifying questions. Jesse, if I may, just part of our conversation, some of the things that have come to mind, and this is the perfect project to identify some of the ownership of the service lines, and some of the issues that I feel are going to come up in the very near future when owners are told that their service lines are galvanized or may need to be replaced. It will become an ordinance and/or a rule that needs to be developed as to those service lines, who's going to replace those service lines, to what degree they need to disclose to future homeowners that those service lines are needing to be replaced should they in turn and to sell the property. I don't think we have those things in place yet. We don't have rules or ordinances or policies set up yet as far as the replacement of these inventories of service lines that are going to need to be replaced. So I kind of feel a little bit the cart's before the horse immediately with the urgency of the project because we don't have those identified yet. So it isn't even so much what does the charter say. Of course, I think BP is always going to cooperate. Thanks, Mark, for clarifying that. But in the same token, we just need to understand the onus of what the homeowner is looking at as far as expense goes, what the expense of replacing the water line, because if I recall, you stated that there's going to be additional hookups. So this project, if we replace the service lines, now we have to do additional hookups to the north and to the south, if I'm understanding. So there's additional work, the scope of work that's needed in order to replace this service line. And I think that's why the urgency to just jump into it without making sure we have all the facts, all of the needs, all the necessities in place, and the policy set in place. There's a concern on my end to try to rush to do that this year. But I also don't want it to just stall either. The residents want the alley replaced, resurfaced. We know that the water lines need to be replaced. We have the opportunity to set policy for service lines on private property and when they need to be replaced. And that's, I guess, where I would just leave it and go with it from there and leave that for discussion.
I'm a little confused on the policy on service lines just on this project because we have all kinds of other houses that are probably going to need the same thing. Or we just don't have a policy? We're just doing whatever. What are we doing for the rest of them?
BPU owns up to the curb stop, and from the curb stop to the house, the homeowner is responsible. But in this case, we have a lot of them that go under garages. So again, need to figure out where, from that new water line, where is they're going to go to the, to the curb stop, which we don't know yet.
So the few that are at an angle that are going to have to go around.
Well, yeah, I mean, garages, a long time ago when they were built, they probably didn't have a garage, and then they just put it up, not even knowing where their water line went. And, well, just like our old house on 9th, it went right next to the garage, they don't think of that. So.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Can I quick clarify the service line? So very much like a street reconstruction, every time that we do the water main and the services with that, we generally do the water main service line as far to the right-of-way line as we feasibly can. Sometimes there's landscaping and that might adjust it in a little bit, but for the most part, we always put the curb stop at the edge of the right-of-way. That allows the homeowner, when they're ready to reconnect their private service line, that they don't have to dig into the city's right-of-way to do so. So that would be the intention with this alley is all of the service lines would be replaced and put a curb stop at as close to the right-of-way as we could, with the exception of the 3 we talked about where we would relocate a secondary service that we would instruct those 3 specific properties when it's time to replace their services to go to the alternative location rather than their original one.
So you do know.
Yeah, Mr. Chezak.
When it comes to this specific alley, Jesse, do you know the width, and then do you know the width of the right-of-way? So how far beyond that width of the alley you might see those curb stops going?
The right-of-way of the alley is about 18, and I think the pavement is roughly 16 to 18, depends on where you're at.
Okay.
So it's really close to the edge of the pavement.
It's very close.
So we have to go into meeting. I don't know if I'll add it as a separate agenda item for full council to discuss again, or if we'll add it as a SPW recommendation. If we don't come up with a recommendation or a consensus between us all, then
Mr. Chair.
we should certainly come up with making it an agenda item. You guys are obviously welcome to come in there, but Yeah, Mr. Chesak.
In that the commission is here, perhaps they would like to make a decision amongst themselves and ask us perhaps to do something or do nothing. I know they have that option, correct?
They do? Yeah.
Okay, I've just thrown it out there.
I'm not sure if this is,
And we have an agenda. It's a.
yeah, we do have an agenda. It's a special meeting. I think you can make it a motion if you'd like to recommend to us, which we can bring forward. But
Personally, I would make the motion that we hold off 1 year. I just think it would be a much better project, so I would make that motion.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. You got your recommendation.
all right. And we can leave it at that unless there's any closing comments. We do have Mr. Smokey. If you want to make any comments, you can, yeah, come up to the microphone. Name and address. Name and address. Yeah. Is the green button on?
1643 South 6th Street, Steve Smokey. Just speaking for myself, holding off a year isn't a huge deal. I know that petition was presented as overlay only, no utilities, so it might be a shock to a lot of the people that signed that petition to find out that there are utilities involved. Maybe holding off a year isn't a bad idea.
Just do the extra cost.
The water is not a cost to you. Correct. But right now, you're not mandated to change them out.
I think part of the problem with the alley is some of those service lines over the years have been replaced. And when you patch that, it's never done the same as when you originally do that. And that's where a lot of the potholes have come from. So waiting and doing it all at one time, you know, the service lines and the water main makes sense. Then we'd have a good alley for years to come.
Yeah, Mr. Anglin.
Yeah, I guess I just, before we, maybe a final comment or whatever, is I just wanted to say thank you to Liaison Councilman Chesak for offering this up as an idea for us to get together. And I agree, Mr. Chair, communication, this is a great opportunity for us to set a precedent moving forward. And also, City Engineer for this. This really helped out today, so thank you. It really provided a lot of context for the meeting tonight. So, and for everyone else with BPU coming. It's a great time to talk about the project and just think about it comprehensively, so thanks a lot.
And just before we close out, we will still have this discussion at council. Like I said, you guys are more than welcome to be there. We want you guys there. But this will add a little complication to next year's projects. That was also one of the issues on the city side. So whether we figure that out easily or not so easily, we want you guys involved in that kind of stuff. So our aging infrastructure is a huge problem for all of us here. So we want to do it as efficiently as possible. So
Mr.
thank
Chair?
you guys for coming. Yeah.
As long as we're in a public meeting, I would move that we recommend to the city council that we, first of all, we add this to our S&PW agenda tonight. And then we also discuss it and then make a recommendation tonight.
To the SPW agenda. Okay.
I'm looking for a second.
Second, sorry.
We have a motion.
I'm sorry. Can I clarify? Your motion is to put it on our agenda?
To, yes, get it on our agenda and then discuss it and
Okay.
then
And
make
then
a
we'll
recommendation.
You aren't actually making the
We have a
recommendation.
motion and a second. I'm going to vote against this because I'd rather have it as a regular agenda item for council because we have a 15-minute.
Okay,
time
I'd amend my motion to put it on the council agenda.
Okay.
At the beginning of the meeting.
I
Are you
don't
okay?
think we can put it,
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
we can add it.
do it at the time of the agenda,
Right.
but we can't do that now.
We can, okay, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
I'll
We'll just make sure to
second
do
your
that.
motion at the time when we're in.
We have a canceled motion or tabled
Yeah.
I'll
motion.
withdraw my motion.
Withdraw.
Drawn motion. All right. Unless there's anything else from anybody, we can adjourn.
That's our intention.
Yeah.
All right. We are adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Went 9 minutes over.